Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back. I am so pleased to be here tonight. Every once in a while, I get to do something that I can't tell you how much I truly enjoy. And tonight will be one of those times because tonight I have, he has been a guest here before, Bob Kiviat. Best known perhaps for his most famous, I would call it his most famous work, Alien Autopsy, watched by millions, still debated to this day. But you may know him from other things, maybe lesser known things. But Alien Autopsy has got to be ranked up there with one of his best works. As a producer, he's done Aliens on the Moon, The Truth Exposed, I Shot JFK, The Shocking Truth. You may also remember him for World's Greatest Hoaxes, Secrets Finally Revealed. There was, of course, Alien Autopsy, UFOs, Best Evidence Ever Caught on Tape. There was two of those, and he was also heavily involved in what is perhaps my favorite show growing up, because I have fond memories of watching it with my father, and that would be Unsolved Mysteries. He is sort of relaunching and coming up with all these incredible new projects. And I wanted to get him in here just to talk about that and some of the changes in the industry, since he made some of the most pivotal, most incredible works on the paranormal. Let's bring him in here.
Steve, thank you for that. I do appreciate that a lot.
You were big. I was just telling him off air that he was a big part of my childhood. Growing up, I didn't even know his, as a child, I didn't know it at the time, but all of my favorite things on television, the weird and wacky stuff, was all brought to us by tonight's guest.
Well, I got to tell you, that really warms my heart, because I remember sitting in production meetings and even meetings with the Fox network when they brought me over from Unsolved Mysteries. And my point was that we have young people watching. The X-Files was very huge then. The average age of an X-File viewer probably was like in the teens and early 20s. I'm sure very young skewed. And they loved that show because young viewers were watching. So I said to them, my specials are going to be very similar to that. Why don't we think about them and do the right thing for them and tell the right stories? So that's how we really approached it. Responsibility, believe it or not.
Yeah, and you and I had a recent conversation about how there was a shift in, let's call it the industry. I hate to call this an industry, but the weird and wacky stuff, aliens, Bigfoot, the paranormal, ghosts, it is an industry.
Well, there's no doubt.
There's been some incredible changes in that industry since you first were hugely and insanely popular. Can we talk about some of those changes?
Sure. We can start just with Alien Autopsy and bring it right up real quickly to the present day. When Alien Autopsy was made, and by the way, remember the show, Steve, was called Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction, with an actual question mark at the end of it. The idea was we did not know what it was. It was a story foisted on us by the people that secured this footage of the alien being and other footage that surrounded it. We were not really saying to anyone other than there's this breaking story. We're going to try to cover it best we can. And as I had my host, Jonathan Frakes, say from Star Trek, until we know more, you'll have to decide for yourself. Now, it sounds like a cliche, but in our case, it was literally true. But at that stage, you have to remember, the Fox network was a fourth network up and coming. They were the ones trying to beat CBS, NBC, and ABC back in the day. And they were treating things so carefully. They could not take a risk. Imagine if they had a couple of things happen before I got there. And there was a risk factor. There was an idea that maybe this could be like something that happened a year or two before. And that involved something called the Noah's Ark hoax. The Noah's Ark hoax was something that ran on CBS.
I remember this one, yeah.
At meetings, you would literally hear the executive behind the show, Mike Darnell, going, no, Bob's a journalist. Bob will take care of this. It's not going to be Noah's Ark, And ironically, Mike went on a recent thing at the TV Academy where they were honoring Mike. And Mike was telling the story about me and him, and he was animated like I am too. And Mike was telling the story about, remember then the Noah's Ark hoax, we were thinking about that. And so he remembered it so well that when he recounted the story of us getting together and doing the big show, it was in the wake of this really nightmare where CBS had.
Yeah, they put a lot of money and time into that, and then it turns out to be garbage, essentially.
I'm not going to blame only the network. In this case, the producers let the network down. Now, did the network let viewers down? Yes. They didn't do the checking they could have done. But the producers always are, at one level or another, they're responsible. So if you're a CBS or a Fox and you bring a producer in to make a show, those credentials of that producer are critical to whether or not the network will be protected or not, whether or not there'll be any kind of, fallout if the show turns out to be whatever, bad in some ways.
There was just a different set of ethical standards for how to properly do a story then. Is that what I'm getting? Because I remember that it used to be that things were much more balanced. In other words, even if people were making fantastical claims, they would often bring in the other side of the story.
Well, you have
a skeptic there to say, hey, this is probably, or, to show. They used to show both sides of the coin when you started. Right. And now it seems like we only get one, and it's carefully manipulated and manicured for us to push this certain narrative. They don't give you all the information. I love the lie by omission.
Well, hold on here. There was actually not only a understanding of balance and credibility and investigative journalism, let's say, but there was also something called broadcast standards and practices. There was I'm going to shout out at Fox, especially Darlene. Darlene was so good. I mean, Darlene would get a rough cut and comment and say, Bob, you may want to think about this one photo. Or they were analyzing Steve down to whether a photo or something would be offensive to somebody. Could you imagine if you made a mistake and you called something a real Noah's Ark, authentic piece of the wood, let's say, and it doesn't turn out to be true? So that was always in my mind, but I never quite understood how something like that could ever happen. But we're not going to digress into that. All I want to say is that there was a standard that I came into as a journalist previously. I wrote for newspapers. I wrote for magazines. I worked at Unsolved Mysteries for a while, doing great shows for them. And again, you're dealing with credibility. You have to deal with the FBI if you're there at Unsolved Mysteries. You have to deal with the police at Unsolved Mysteries. You have to deal with NASA and those type of people, which thankfully they respected me because I had those credentials already. So if you have those credentials and you come in and do a show, let's say even Aliens on the Moon, The Truth Exposed for NBC just a few years ago, the executives there go, Bob, look, you're going to be interviewing Buzz Aldrin. He worked on the moon. He walked on the moon. I mean, you're asking questions about what may be in these photographs. Gigantic.
It's amazing.
I mean, you better make sure you're on your game. You better make sure that you know what you're talking about. Ironically, in that situation, I couldn't even get Buzz Aldrin a few years ago to look at the images from the NASA Lunar Planetary Institute, basically. So these
you wouldn't even look at them?
They came from like NASA's
official. And he wouldn't look at them?
Wouldn't even look at them. But he did say, as you remember, I think we talked before, he did say, basically, Bob, you should be looking at the moon near Mars called Phobos. There's a monolith on Phobos. So he's trying to get us off of our moon and look at that moon. But I found that intriguing because we are talking again about evidence of extraterrestrial life and evidence of intelligence. So it's the same thing, whether you're talking about a structure on the moon here or a structure on Phobos near Mars, if it's artificial and it's created by other people than us, those are extraterrestrial proofs, right? So that to me is what I'm about. I'm about trying to get to the proof and the truth. And you can't do that if you're not a journalist. You can't do that as just an entertainment guy trying to put, like you said, something out there that the public may find sensational. But if it's not true, where does that lead us, right?
That just makes you a garbage peddler.
Yeah, and by the way, the change that you're referring to was over many, many, many years. First, they separated, just before I got involved in television, they separated this balance you're talking about. It used to be that there's something called, basically fair and balanced, reporting. If you said one thing, you've got to balance it out with what may be another way to look at it. There was always balance. Even the news departments of those major networks did not have to have any worries about money. Those news divisions were not generating any kind of real income. They weren't meant to be. But all of a sudden, just before I got involved in television, they decided in our country, we're talking about our government, that we don't have to worry anymore about being fair and balanced with the news or anything else. We can just let the entertainment companies take over. And the entertainment parts of these divisions, if you will, of every network took over for greed, just for money purposes. And so that money became the golden rule, not truth, not journalism or anything like that. And even when the Noah's Ark hoax happened, one of the people at CBS News went public and said, we're a network. We have a news division. We have an entertainment division. Between 7 and 8 o'clock at night, the viewer doesn't really know what changed. So if you do a documentary about Noah's Ark at 8 o'clock and you had a news hour at 6:30 or 7, you better be as careful in your work, right? The viewer doesn't go sit home and go, honey, at 8 o'clock at night to the wife, we don't have to worry about anything on this hour because, it's all baloney at 8 o'clock. They don't say that. They go, this is a network. I'm watching the news at 7. I really care about what's going on in the world. And then I'm watching this amazing story that may be true and tied into our biblical teachings and everything else. But it turns out not to be true. Now, it's not about blame as much. It's about what can we learn from that? What we can learn is what we're seeing now. When cable television took over the paranormal, and they did, a show called Ghost Hunters in 2004 literally changed the landscape. Now, hold on. It's not even a documentary. It's a faux documentary, FAUX, meaning it's like a documentary, but it's fake. It's not. Ghost Hunters is not a real documentary, nor were many other shows that came out.
And you're right. That was kind of the first of its kind to just throw everything out the window and it's all fake, but we're going to pretend it's real. And and they make it sort of appear to be like a documentary.
You got it.
It's deceptive.
It had some sort of the reality TV world somehow morphed together with this kind of pseudo documentary stuff. And it became licensed to lie, licensed to just say, hey, Tom DeLonge, you got a show? Bring it in, whatever you got. We'll put it on. Don't worry.
That was the worst UFO show I've ever seen. Yeah.
The channel should be ashamed of themselves, and they can call me up and discuss it. I've been telling them for 3 years now about Lou Elizondo, about TTSA. It's a stock scheme. It's almost abhorrible to me to see things like this, because I know people care about UFOs. They care about whether we're being visited. We have a 70-year history, Steve, of fascinating UFO-related cases. In one of my new shows, one of my new films, not TV shows, but films, movies, documentary features, we're going to show for the first time a guy who knows where all the bones are buried on the UFO subject. May not be what people want to hear, but there's a few cases that literally have shocked him. He's from the government. And I'm telling you, not necessarily in a way that makes him believe that UFOs are from another planet, but enough to say, you know what? I'll throw my credentials in here. I'll get the FAA involved. I'll look into what the evidence is. And there's a fascinating story we're going to tell about the JAL 1628. Literally, a jumbo jet was followed by a gigantic something. And literally, when they saw this on radar, they really couldn't explain it. So the FAA came in and said, we still don't know. To this day, it may be one of the great cases never really seen properly by the American public. And we're going to show that, as well as some intriguing cases that we can talk about today. So I'm telling you right now, this TTSA Lou Elizondo travesty, okay? And he's not the only one. But he's the one who went on, major news organizations, airwaves, and said, they're probably not from here. These are beings we don't know from where, or ships we don't know from where, without the slightest bit of backup. I mean, the guy was just kind of winging it. And now look at him. Now he's like come and gone. He's pretty much out of the limelight, and everyone's wondering what's going on.
Where in the world is Lou Elizondo?
Well, we'll get into that because I think there's a.
Well, it's funny. It's like that meteoric rise. Sometimes it's a meteoric rise, and then it's a meteoric fall. And he may be off into the land of, I don't know, some other people who just vanished once they were hugely popular in the UFO community.
Yeah, Steve, you got to remember something really important. Credible journalism is not based on whether or not you have a job at CBS or ABC or NBC or Fox News or whatever. It's based on the credentials of the individuals, the people doing the work. And if you're a journalist at NBC News today or CNN or Fox News, the people that promoted Lou Elizondo and this whole nonsense at TTSA.
New York Times,
They're relying on these producers behind the camera to know this material. If they don't know this material, they are lost. They are completely lost. And that's what happened. They did not know the material. It started with the New York Times. Leslie Kean comes in as their expert. Bottom line, if you are...
who believes in past lives and alien and abduction, she's just a true believer.
Those are your words. I just said not objective, okay? Not objective.
Oh, that's a better way to say it. You're right. See, Bob, I'm trying to learn from the veteran here, I will use that. I will use that. Not objective is a nicer way to say. It's such a nice way to say that woman's a wackadoo.
If you know the person or the people involved, like I said, you can research their background, and if they had a propensity, in some cases, to believe in alien abductions to a level that you literally bond with one of the leaders of that cult worship scenario, which, by the way, it is an alien abductions is the least credible part of the UFO phenomena, only because we don't have real evidence to support it. You can't call it evidence if somebody goes into hypnosis regression and literally starts to remember things. As
that's a whole industry, I know there's a woman, Barbara Lamb, whose full-time job it is to interview people and bring out their alien experiences.
But this is interesting, Steve. If you're a journalist and you recognize that alien abductions are believed by lots of millions of people, but there's not a lot of evidence to support it, you need to say that. You need to go, listen, you know what? You may believe it. You believe John Mack did wonderful work, or these other people with their hypnosis regression as their tool. But if you know the court systems and the history we've had as a country, there are people that have been brought up on charges of all kinds of abuse, sexual abuse, child abuse. And those cases have been thrown out because the only evidence people had were these kids being talked to by therapists, and the kids are saying so-and-so. It doesn't mean they didn't go through a horrific experience, whatever it may be, but the evidence was not there to support it. So people should not have their entire lives ruined over
like the satanic panic thing. That was largely...
And by the way, with all due respect, if people got away with it, terrible acts, because the court found or the juries found that hypnosis regression was not credible, okay, but the point is hypnosis regression does not prove aliens are taking men's sperm, taking women's ovums, trying to blend children together with other types of all types of different scenarios. It gets really kind of weird.
Yeah, the whole hybridization thing, I've never bought that. Right. I think I want to see some form of evidence, and I have been frustrated with a few people wanted to be interviewed, and I kind of say to them things like, well, set up a camera. Oh, they'll know I do that, and then they won't come. It's just, there's not enough meat on the bones there for me.
But Steve, we had a little...
But I believe some of these people are having genuine experiences. They truly believe.
But hold on, we had a little production problem. I'm going to step out for 1 second and fix my...
Okay, sure. Here.
I want to make sure I can see you guys and see you.
Here, I'll mute your microphone there while we do this. And I know many of you are here perhaps looking for the bombshells, the Corey Goode bombshells, and we are busily working on that story as
we should bring that. I'm back. You should bring that up. I think Corey Goode is a good way to get into the next part I wanted to tell you about. That if you have...
I was just telling the audience, I know many people may be frustrated. They jumped on here and they go, where's the Corey Goode story stuff? And you guys need to be aware that we here, and me and Corey, have been 24/7 on that. Like, I think we stopped at 6 a.m.
Well, hold on.
When we had... we're getting all that stuff together. We have released part 1 of this deposition of Corey Goode, which, by the way, he didn't think would ever become public. So he makes some stunning admissions in that. And we have to redact certain things for legal reasons, but we're going to be broadcasting all 6 hours of that deposition. And there are some bombshells in there, admissions from Corey Goode, including he's never been to space. The Anshar are figments of his imagination. And so largely his entire story falls apart due to bad paperwork. The lawyer was supposed to file some certain paperwork within a certain time frame to get the depositions marked confidential and not to be publicly released. His lawyer screwed up and didn't do that, and now it's all public. And until I'm ordered by, a judge or whatever, we're gonna broadcast all of them once properly redacted.
Steve, many people.
Bob, I'm interested in what you think, because there was another shift here in the whole industry, if you want to call it an industry, from people used to need evidence. Along comes David Wilcock and Corey Goode, and that's all gone. You don't need any evidence.
Let me try to frame this back to what we were talking about. So
Sure.
at the same time, not to make this a college course, but it kind of is. As we saw the lessening of objectivity and objective journalism and being balanced on the network airwaves, we also saw cable TV kind of glom onto this and not care too much about fact or fiction, as long as it sold, as long as the public were watching enough to justify from Ghost Hunters on, they would do it. The bad news is regular networks like the ABC, NBC, CBS, and Foxes, they've told me recently and years ago, as cable glommed onto it, they backed away. They ceded it to them. They said goodbye. Then came, over the last couple of years, this influx of, I guess you call direct to streaming. Now, direct to streaming has a lot of great benefits. One of the downsides of direct to streaming is people bring distributors these products called documentaries. The network.
I can see you're not a fan already. Right. Yeah.
What was that?
I can see you're not a fan already.
No, right? The problem is
there's a quality control problem for sure.
That's right.
I think
one of the companies that has been really big in this recognized the quality control problem, in my humble opinion, and that's one reason we closed the deal to make numerous documentary feature films in the next 2 or 3 years with this same company that has been really building the streaming world for producers. Now, the objective view here is that why don't we bring in people that have credentials, that understand how to create credible programming, do good research, protect the network, protect the investors, because in the new model, Steve, you don't have the money coming from ABC, NBC, in my case, Fox and NBC.
Yeah, you're not just handing a budget. Yeah, you have to go get your budget.
You establish a budget, and then you go out to the world and you say, please help us develop this and make this so individual, corporate, and or investors, let's say, they're the same. Investors should be protected. Distributors should be protected from bunk, from things that are not well researched, from things that are clearly just find a fancy for somebody. And so on that note, I do believe that's one of the reasons, at least, that I've made a deal, or they made a deal with me, this one company that will be very, I think, prolific in helping to kind of moderate some of what we're talking about.
Yeah, you got to right the ship at some point.
Exactly.
It's going to sink. It's going to sink if you don't right the ship.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that someone who sold a lot of, let's say, documentary orders, if you will, clicks, you know how it goes now with Amazon or whatever.
Oh, I know.
it doesn't mean that you're silly for buying it, but you should have known what you were buying. Just because someone writes, this is the follow-up investigation from the New York Times. What? First of all, the New York Times, that was a fallacious story to begin with. So if you're investigating that fallacious story, then you better be a really great journalist to separate the fact from fiction. But if you just put out the same crap that everybody else is putting out, I don't care.
Repeat the talking points. Yeah.
I don't care how much millions, I don't care what you made. The point is you've really ripped people off. You've given people a false story. And therefore, who's going to correct that? Well, I'm proud to say we will have a movie coming out that will correct this called Eupolitics. and it will correct everything.
I can't wait to
And Lou
see. I can't
Elizondo,
wait. I've heard a little bit about this from you and one other party you're aware
you know
of.
what I'd like to share? The Ufologics name came out of a meeting I had at Discovery with a wonderful executive. I like this guy a lot. His name is Andrew. And he came up with this kind of concept in the meeting we had 3.5 years ago, where I said to him, I think it's all baloney. We're going to get to the bottom of it. You know, Andrew, we're behind the scenes. We know this beat better than anybody. And he goes, you know, Bob, this reminds me of a way to do a show about the politics of UFOs, a little bit like this political show that's on so-and-so. And I said to myself on the plane home from New York to LA, I said, ufologics. It's ufologics. It's what so I think what you're going to meet, and you're going to meet one of the most interesting guys in this documentary feature for the same company that's been putting out a lot of these other things. You're going to be hearing about the CIA's feelings a little bit, but more than just the CIA, you're going to be hearing about an individual who's been there for 35 years or more, who's not only, he's the only guy that I know, the only CIA scientist who ever briefed a United States president about UFOs.
Yeah, and
so again,
I don't know if you want to name him, but some people are going to be guessing, and I know who you're speaking of. And there has been rumors of him doing a full-on 2-hour interview for ages, and he has been, much like Richard Doty, I would say, his name has been mentioned in so many different UFO stories throughout the years that I, for one, can't wait to hear what he actually says.
Well, I can say to you, if people are already guessing in the UFO field, because you guys, and I'm sure your viewers and your listeners are very up to speed on the UFO history. So this is the man that has been thought of the keeper of the secrets. And he gets a great chuckle out of this because, you know,
they say he's an MJ-12 guy. He's the guy who gets the MJ-12 now.
I don't want to disappoint anybody, but this will tell the aficionados who we're talking about. He said to me recently, Bob, there is no weird desk. I didn't take over the weird desk.
Long rumored to be running the weird desk of the CIA, yes.
But hold on. There is indeed a history, if you go back to the Cuban Missile Crisis even, of a photographic division, if you will, that does get into the truth about things that could be things on tape, video, photographs like UFOs could be. So again, there is definitely a hierarchy that's been going on for decades about analyzing satellite imagery. You know, if a UFO was caught on tape and caught up by a satellite and it needs to be looked at, there might be some reasons for these groups to kind of like get together.
Yeah, they got to analyze it, see if it's a threat at least.
Right. But to say there's like a guy like at the X-Files, you know, in that room, you know, with the box.
And I want to believe poster. Yeah.
And again, the X-Files are sort of morphed people's thinking into like, well, is that what the government's like? The X-Files is a fictional show, which, by the way, for 2 or 3 years, they really tried to stay focused on cases that were at least in the public lexicon, cultural lexicon. But now they went off into season 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and whatever, into like monsters and booga booga, you know, kind of stuff. But I'm going to tell you right now that the American public and the world deserves a lot better treatment than we've been given by producers that have not approached it in journalistic fashion. There needs to be journalism. There needs to be actual work. I'm working with a fabulous guy, you know, Manny. This guy, Manny, by the way, I want to say something about him.
Area 503, those who know him as Area 503, and the producer of the Who's Lewd documentary, which was incredibly controversial, and we talked about it here, and that turned into a whole thing, Bob. I got doxxed and threatened and all kinds of stuff.
Let me ask you this, Steve. Why did it take a guy like Manny working from his house?
Because no one else would do it.
Why would it take a guy like
courage to do that? No one else had the courage to do that.
What CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox News,
they all failed, and Manny succeeded, I think.
And Manny comes along like, you know, Don Quixote, you know, and literally shows them their job, shows them what to do, follow the money, follow the paper trail. Unfortunately, Steve, it requires work. It requires dedication. If I see this guy, Gadi Schwartz at NBC, I'm calling him out right now. Gadi Schwartz came out with this one guy who actually does fairly good reports on other subjects. And out of nowhere, he breathlessly covers this new UAP issue. I mean, it's almost ludicrous. I mean, I feel bad. The guy should call me on the phone and go, Bob, look, I know you've been through this many, many years. Work with me. Tell me what I need to know, because he's out there completely vacuous. If he has a production crew behind him of producers, which he does.
He's got an army of them. Yeah.
Are they doing any work? Are they doing any of the work that Manny did? I don't know.
No, they're just going to tell him about the numbers. You're going to get great numbers on this one, boss.
Well, by the way, now you notice New York Times, NBC, a little sheepishly, but they did. They're all pushing back now, going, I guess those are objects the government knows in those 2 or 3 videos. I guess they know what they are.
Yeah, it only took 5 years for them to admit it.
I guess they're not alien. Oh, my God. But you see, somebody wrote a paper recently, and I'll tell you more about this later if you want to know. And he wrote something. It's a diatribe all over the place. But there's one thing he wrote which is true. This has taken the interest of UFOs down in American culture. There's less interest now than there was before the article came out in the New York Times. If Leslie Kean or anybody else wants to say, well, it was kind of worth it because even though he didn't really tell the story properly, I'm paraphrasing, it got the story of UFOs out there again. What? UFOs are out there, dude. I've been covering it more than someone estimated recently that I had 1 billion views on television, not YouTube or whatever, on television. On UFOs caught on tape 1 and 2 for Fox and Alien Autopsy. That's Alien 1 billion Autopsy. Views. Yeah. Just those 3 shows, if you count them, those 3 create a lot of interest. And we did a lot of journalism on all of that. And by the way, you mentioned in the world's greatest hoaxes, secrets finally revealed for Fox, we debunked the alien autopsy. So Chicago Tribune wrote, for me, the truth is out there. The goal was, I told Fox at the very big meeting, they brought up Noah's Ark. I said, if anyone is going to expose it, it's going to be us. We have the story. We know it better than anybody. And if we can find the little weak aspects of the story and expose it, it'll be us. Sure enough, ABC News tried. They couldn't do anything. A year later, we came out and they gave us credit. A lot of TV pundits and journalism pundits gave us credit for turning on our own story and saying, look, you thought this was real. Maybe you did. We didn't know. Now we know. And we broke that 3 years later. So it's not like we sat there and waited. I just couldn't find enough evidence to go to the public and say, aha, it's a fraud. The second we had that evidence, we went public. And here's what people don't know.
And this is a problem I have with people like George Knapp, who's been selling the Bob Lazar story for 30 years.
Wait, he's not selling it. He's reselling it.
Yeah, but the point is like he doesn't want to talk about all the evidence that the story is fake or ever give his audience that. And I think that's only fair. Like, I send him stuff and he yelled at me.
Let me tell you how different I'll tell you how different a guy like George and I are. When I got to know George early in my career, we were very similar. He was working at a news station. I had been a news outfit. I worked for news divisions like Tribune. I worked in that same genre or that same, kind of milieu, if you will. So George was looking at Russian UFO research. I was very interested in that. We shared a lot of evidence. When Alien Autopsy was made, people need to know this. We knew it could be a fraud, of course. We knew that it could be discovered as a fraud during our own production. So we had a plan. If I discovered any evidence of fraud in this case, actual proof of a fraud, we were going to go on Channel 11 here in LA, KTTV Channel 11.
Fess up. I never knew that.
2 anchors, Christine Devine and John Beard. We were going to literally go national from KTTV News in LA with a breaking special. The alien autopsy fraud exposed during our production. So anybody like this one producer on our show I hired as a field producer, he had the audacity, the temerity to start telling people years later, oh, he knew it was a fraud and Fox and I held that information back. That is categorically 1,000% so far from the truth, this guy should be ashamed of himself. He came back from an interview with Santilli because I was busy in LA. I had met Ray already. I had already dealt with Ray Santilli in England. I didn't need to see him again. So I sent a producer out there to England to interview him. He came back with his issues about Ray's honesty and blah, blah, blah. I said to this guy, of course we know Ray could be very, very untrustworthy. That's not the point. The point is when we know for sure, we'll tell the public. In the meantime, we'll tell what we know now. This guy had the audacity to put on LinkedIn. I mean, not LinkedIn, on Wikipedia and etc. That we knew, I and the Fox network knew it was a fraud. That's absurd. And this guy should be ashamed of himself. So he was trying to do what self-grandizing things are. They try to make themselves sound more important than they are. Oh, listen, I knew. I don't know where that guy is in the industry now, but he owes me a phone call and an apology. And I will correct it on Wikipedia, and I will correct it everywhere. Fox should be commended for having that plan with me. It's very unknown to many people that we had that plan.
Yeah, I never knew that you guys were ready to spill the beans on it. If
it was a news story, of course.
Yeah, it would have been a news story. And one of the things, I'm not going to say who, but somebody came for an interview here and they said something to me like, oh, I'm telling you, Stephen, my story is true. And I told them the truth. I said, if your story is fake, I'm still going to get views, and then I will reveal it as fake. And we did in time.
You did.
Took a few months, but we did. So you get views on both ends. I think that's a brilliant plan.
Right, so then Corey Goode comes along. And by the way, I don't know much about the guy. I'll be quite frank with you, because I did Aliens on the Moon, The Truth Exposed, and millions.
Well, he lived on the moon on a secret moon base, Bob. But then he admitted he never went to space ever under oath in the middle of a deposition. It's
somebody came to me and told me that, well, what happened was we were doing an investigation of the Aguadilla UFO in Puerto Rico in 2017. Yeah. So there I flew there with my team. We did a YouTube report with a good friend of mine, Bill Day, who has a show called Real or Fake. So we literally did a 30-minute episode breaking the Aguadilla UFO story. I was going to meet with the FAA people at the Aguadilla airport. The FAA people blocked the actual guy in charge of the tower that night when the film was shot to not give me an interview. There's a lot of good stuff there we can talk about. But in the course of doing that investigation, I met a guy who did a fabulous analysis of the Aguadilla UFO. And by the way, if people don't know, that's where the UFO seems to come out of the water and split into two. And these UAP guys tried to glom all over that and claim it was one of their UAPs. It's not a UAP. It's a UFO, came out of the water, freaked out the area of Puerto Rico. That's all great. But the bottom line is I met a guy who told me he did this great analysis of the footage. And he said to me, Bob, my group left MUFON. The reason we left MUFON is this guy, Corey Goode. I'm like, who's Corey Goode again? I was like, I don't even care. Who is this guy, right? He tells me the story. I go, you mean there's a guy claiming that he went to the moon as part of some secret space program?
Oh, he sure did.
And the guy,
Bob, it's the LOC, the Lunar Operations Command.
Hold on, let me finish. Okay? So I go, let me.
And that base was built by the Nazis somehow.
So this was a group. You're right. This was a group within MUFON, as I found out later. What you said. This is a group within MUFON that left the whole group left the MUFON group, if you will. MUFON lost some great people because their point was you allow Corey Goode, a guy who made up a fantastical story with no proof, to dominate conferences. There are conferences all over this country, and I guess other countries too, where Corey Goode was the main attraction with no evidence at all. I mean, why would anybody believe this cockamamie story? I mean, between you and me, if you could prove one scintilla of that story, good luck. I found out recently, right? You told me a deposition over his battle with Gaia. And by the way, Gaia, talk about a group with no credentials at all of journalism.
Well, he's got multiple lawsuits. The deposition we've been dealing with is against his former business partner, his former Hollywood connection, Leon Isaac Kennedy, and his former conference organizer. But there's a separate lawsuit against Gaia TV that alleges a vast criminal conspiracy against him and all of this stuff. And that one boils down to him suing his critics who said his story wasn't true, and Gaia. He grouped them all together.
So now so here he is now.
He admitted in a deposition under oath, he was asked if he went to space, and he went, physically, I don't think so. But then he started talking about astral travel.
It's
like
just
maybe
like
he went to the
moon.
Like
the UFO. It's like the alien abduction phenomena within the UFO phenomena. Okay, the alien abduction phenomenon. People started to say, well, it doesn't matter if the person left. I'll tell you a great story. There was a story I researched at Unsolved Mysteries when I was there. The story was that a guy slept with his wife in his bedroom, and there were 2 Great Danes that slept with them. And I used to have a Great Dane, so I know what they're like.
Oh, I never had one, but my dad's friend did growing up, and I remember those things.
So the story is these 2 Great Danes are sleeping by the bed, and this woman claims she was abducted. She came back into the room. The dogs never moved. Her rationale was, I never left physically. You know, like John Mack says, she says, it's like John Mack and other people say, you don't have to leave your physical body. You may actually be leaving your body, having a UFO event, and coming back to your body. And I'm scratching my head going, no, wait a minute. What about taking sperm? What about having
none of this makes sense.
Hybrid children. So let me get this straight. I was saying to the woman, you mean to say you never left physically, but you were abducted by aliens? What, your soul was abducted? I forgot about that story completely, never touched it again. And I said to myself, is that what alien abduction phenomena has now created, that you don't even need evidence anymore? You need someone to go, well, I aggressed somebody. That's one piece of evidence, and that's enough.
Well, no, there was this change, it seems like, and Corey Goode and David Wilcock ushered in this change. And it used to be that you needed some form of evidence to get popular, to tell your story, to get conference work, whatever. You needed to provide some kind of evidence. And whether people produced fake evidence or not, a lot of people everybody would produce, they'd have some kind of evidence.
Something.
And Corey Goode and David Wilcock ushered in this change. And after them came thousands of people that are just telling stories now, and they have no evidence, no proof. They have excuses for why they have no evidence, no proof.
It's a cultural thing.
Corey Goode and David Wilcock have literally made millions of dollars. I think that would be fair to say, telling stories. And
where would the millions come from? Who would be paying these millions?
Gaia TV pumped a lot of money into these guys originally with the television show or streaming show called Cosmic Disclosure, and then Gaia TV also bought controlling interest, or so I'm told, in many different UFO conferences, and would push their people, their stars. The stars of their network would get pushed to go into these UFO conventions that they either had some business with or leverage over, or bought controlling interest, or even, I think they bought whole
so in other words, money. So in other words, money, throwing money at a story or earning money from a story that might be complete bullshit and bunk somehow gives it some level of credibility in society because money was thrown at it or money was made from it. That somehow gives it a.
I don't believe it does, but this is what happened. I think Corey Goode was an artificial construct. If he had come along independently with this story, I don't think it would have gotten legs. But the fact that David Wilcock, formerly of Ancient Aliens, was involved, we have Jay Widener as the producer, who, by the way, has since said.
Who is David Wilcock? Let me ask this question.
Well, it depends on.
I don't know anything about the guy.
Depends on when you ask. He is at various times an ancient astronaut theorist, a psychic, a channeler. He's channeled the Egyptian god Ra. He at one point claimed to be Edgar Casey reincarnated.
How does this pass the giggle factor? How does anybody?
I don't know. And quite honestly, Bob, we have a whole series here. We call it The Wacky World of Wilcock. And I'll send you just one video from it. And all we do is take his talks and cut them up and make it a little funny. And it is ridiculous. This guy is talking about bathing in his own piss because the Archangel Michael told him to. Then he'd get superpowers. He's got telekinetic powers now from bathing in piss. But he rose to fame from ancient astronauts. He was one of the talking heads that would go, so how could this have happened? It must be aliens, basically.
Somehow David Childress and the guy with the hair, Giorgio, and
David Wilcock all get together and they do the History Channel show Ancient Aliens. And I'm told by a person that was an early, just low-level production worker on that when the ratings came in from the first couple of episodes of that, History Channel had a big meeting and they were like, forget history. We're Ancient Aliens now. They went all signature show. Right. When exactly. The ratings for the original few episodes, like it got 100 times more views and viewers than their normal programming got. So that's what happened.
How much more?
Over 100 times more than any of their regular real history documentaries
I don't know
got.
that could be true, because let me give you.
Well, this is what I was told.
Let me tell you the numbers, okay? When you're a History Channel, you're lucky if you get 2 million to 3 million people to watch a show. So what you're describing right now,
I could be wrong in the numbers.
It can't be right. So
what was described. What was described is they saw the ratings and they were like, we got to do more shows like this, and that marked the change for.
But ratings are relative. The ratings for Alien Autopsy, 15 million people. World's Greatest Hoax is 50 million people. UFOs Caught on Tape, same level. When you start talking numbers today, you're talking 2 million people.
Oh, I guess
2.5 million people. So is it worth throwing fact out the door and truth out the door for just enough ratings to call yourself a channel still existing? This is why we have a dumbing down of our television and film products, because people decided, you know what? We got to survive. Any way we have to survive, we'll survive. If we can put on a fake documentary and call it a documentary or some kind of reality documentary show and get away with it, we will. And they do.
Yeah. Well, I just mean especially that the numbers sort of changed History Channel. I remember growing up, my father loved history. And so we had the History Channel. And it was always like well-sourced, well-documented, well-researched World War II documentaries about different battles and things. And I think at that point, they provided a good public service, not just entertainment. But at some point we make the switch from credible journalism, credible history research into the fantastical world of great ratings. And who cares?
By the way, they're kind of doing a little bit like Fox News does. During the day, they try to stay somewhat.
Yeah, they still do. Yeah.
But when that primetime hour comes on, man, put on anything. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
And you sit back and say what CBS said years ago about the Noah's Ark thing. But it's just entertainment, shucking all responsibility completely for the content they put out.
Well, this Corey Goode thing is interesting because he, for years now, has presented his stories as real-world physical experiences.
Why would you believe it?
To the best of my knowledge, I don't, but people have. And now, under oath, he's asked, are the Anshar real, which is supposed to be these inner Earth people he's in contact with? And he said, no, they're from... they're my spirit guides from my meditation. So they're not real, and numerous times during this deposition, the lawyer got him to admit that, I dramatize. It's based on real world experiences. And then there's dramatization over it. And so he's never been to space. How are you a secret space program insider that's blowing the whistle on the secret space program when you admit under oath you've never been to space? And I think this is going to be problematic for him because now he has to choose between, he's essentially saying, he doesn't care if people believe him or not now based on his deposition. But it's like, well, when did you lie? Did you lie when you were under oath, or did you lie when you were on all those UFO shows talking about this stuff? Or when you were standing on a UFO conference stage getting applause?
It's shocking. Do me a favor.
Courage.
I'm gonna get my light back on again. I'm gonna tell you one quick thing. I'm gonna ask you a quick thing. Tell me what you see in this deposition video, because I want to hear it. I want to get a copy of it. Tell me what you see.
Sure. Well, let's see. What we get is some stunning revelations. And remember, I'm still digesting through it, but these depositions reveal, first of all, that his the alien species that he claimed to be in contact with, and the inner Earth people he claimed to be in contact with, all these different stories that he was telling us, these are real world experience. This happened to me. Now he's sort of admitting they were all works of fiction. And I don't want to get in legal trouble with this guy. He sues everybody. So pardon me for paraphrasing, but he said that these are his intellectual property and that no one else, and then so the lawyer is sort of pressing him like, well, is this fictional, or, like, did you go to space? And he says, well, physically, not that I'm aware of.
How could anybody with a straight face accept that as an answer? That's the most ridiculous.
But now he's in a bad situation, because does that mean that did he just make all this up so he would have intellectual property and something to sell, or are these real world experiences?
Well, you proved my point,
problem.
Steve. You proved the point we were talking about earlier. Not my point, our point. The idea of truth is gone. The only way we're ever going to get truth is as producers, as creators of content, as YouTubers, as whatever we want to be. If we have integrity, if we're integritists, and we really want to be factually fair with people about truth, we won't have this problem. But if truth has gone out the door, people call it a post-truth world right now, where does it lead? Where are we headed? I asked that question rhetorically. You're a bright guy. Where are we headed?
Yeah, I think that at some point the ship has to right itself or it sinks.
That's my goal. Now you know my goal for the next 2 or 3 years with the company.
Yeah, and I mean, Bob, I got to struggle with this, but every once in a while, I think I named my show Truth Seekers. It's a blessing and a curse.
I love it
because people hold me accountable. We had somebody on, we occasionally have somebody on, and we give them the forum and we give them the floor, but then we hard press question them about proof and evidence, and occasionally it doesn't go well, but my audience holds me accountable here. We can't.
As they should. By the way,
back bullshit. We can't do it here.
We are going to reestablish the fact or fiction brand that I started at Fox to get a little squirrely at the end when they decided to take the title and give it to another producer named Dick Clark, God rest his soul. I love Dick Clark. We all love Dick Clark for music, history, and all that stuff. But
I love him for that, but not so much for his production.
Dick Clark Productions decides they needed to add fact or fiction to a made-up show they had called Beyond Belief. So Fox asked me in a very strong way, could they use fact or fiction?
They gave you an offer you couldn't refuse.
Well, they sort of did it. I can be honest with you. I rue the day I agreed to this, but I got one of my UFO shows to start on as a result, and that's another story someday. But we don't know if they really needed that, but they asked for it. So I said, if you take fact or fiction, they said, you could take it back after we're done. So it took many years later, but I'm taking it back. So the new shows are going to have that fact or fiction. Remind yourself why you have Truth Seekers. You have Truth Seekers because you want people to know that's your goal. Fact or fiction. That's my goal. Imagine someone calls me up and goes, you don't know the difference between fact or fiction. I mean, I have to know the difference if I'm going to do a show about fact or fiction, right? I need to know that I'm pursuing fact, not fiction. That's what I'm pursuing. So the idea is if you had Truth Seekers as a name and you decide to put shows on that clearly were not about truth seeking, you'd have a problem.
Yeah. But I'm glad for that. And I'm glad, by the way, I'm not complaining. I'm glad when an audience member holds us accountable. It's a tight, some of these interviews yours is a pleasure, but some of these interviews, with some of these people that are making fantastical claims, it's a tightrope walk. I have to be kind and fair to them, but I have to push them. And some people occasionally say I didn't push them enough, or I didn't, I should have, did this or did that. It's a tough tightrope here, but I'm glad for the people holding us accountable. And imagine this: we do have a reputation for integrity here and for doing the right thing and not lying to our audience, and that makes us a minority in this whole thing, believe it or not. Because most people just play the game, and those are the people. Yeah,
something else happened too, though, over the last few years since this period where we'll just kind of put into a bracket. We had Corey Goode, allegedly, whoever this character is, with Wilcock pushing it to on Gaia. Gaia helped create this whole kind of myth. And the next thing you know, the conferences, the UFO conferences, are losing attendees. They're not coming much at all. And then there's shows on cable, as we discussed, that have no interest in telling the truth or not. It's only whatever sells. That's fine, okay? The problem with that now, it led to a moment in our history now where the people that are going to be funding these newer documentaries coming out through streaming and other methods, through theatrical or whatever, those investors are owed the same amount of respect that a network that funded something would have deserved, and also the distributor, who now is kind of sitting there a little bit naked because they don't know how good a product they're getting from the producers they're dealing with. So only when they get it out to the public and find some reaction Do they know what kind of quality that documentary may or not be? So I think we owe it as producers, first of all, you have to have credentials. You have to have worked for news organizations. You have to be able to have accountability. One of the producers making these kind of direct to streamings really kind of freaked me out a few weeks ago when he said to me on the phone, Bob, I have no one to answer to. I have no bosses. I just work on my own computer. I do my own thing. Really? All by yourself. No checks,
no oversight.
no balances, no nothing. And by the way, what are your credentials? You made a couple of documentaries maybe in the last 20 years. Did you make it for a network? Did you make it for an actual business entity? Or did you make it yourself and somehow foist it out there somewhere to the public and you call yourself a documentary maker? Well, there's going to be a lot of, how shall we put this, comparisons coming on in the years to come when they see the kind of work I do versus that. And when someone says to me, I don't have a boss, meaning I can put whatever I want into my little show, what I make, and no one challenges me, good luck.
Well, I have that situation, but I do have good people around me, and I have an incredible audience that always will keep me honest. I'm sure of it. You know.
Well, how do you feel about some later? Give me a feeling about a couple of things that have come out lately. There was something recently from Brazil. There was something. I mean, tell me.
Yeah, the Virginia case, we have covered it, and I have a real problem with James Fox's documentary and his coverage of that case because it was very one-sided. He told all of the, it must be true side of it, and he left out a lot of the skeptic side. And I am aware that case has been pretty thoroughly debunked now, more so than I was before.
It's probably one of the most categorically debunked stories of sensational UFO contact with alien creatures or things like that. And I'm going to be honest with you, I would actually like people to look at the history of every case they look at on video or on streaming, whatever. All you got to do is go back to the research on the internet, and you can check these cases. So even if you found it intriguing enough to watch it and you felt there was some entertainment value, it's easy to check the facts. Easy.
Yeah, I think Anthony Bergalia, isn't it right? He did a whole debunk of the whole story.
Tony Baraglia is one of the top researchers in this field.
I agree.
He approaches the UFO phenomenon just like he approaches the work he does, which I understand from Tony. He literally vets people for government jobs, even Area 51 jobs, right? So he literally is on top of people's background, facts, who they are, what's going on. So in 2012, he put out a very clear, succinct report about why that particular case is laughable. And unfortunately, it's not laughable because, unfortunately, it involved possibly a crippled person. And that crippled person was sort of taken advantage of a little bit. And if you follow the story Tony did, he also pointed out why certain people who were thought to be really credible aspects of the story denied it completely and said it's ridiculous. And again, anecdotal, someone saying, I saw something.
Especially when the story is not consistent over the years. These right. People's stories have changed significantly. The crash site person first said
there's no crash.
He arrived and he was there for 5 minutes, and then the military arrived later. He said that the military was there when he got there. There's a lot of inconsistencies.
This is a kind of a little message to other people, even distributors who put stuff out. Always be worried when you see a show or a movie or anything made like, into a documentary where the word allegedly is used so often, where the word, and that's why in my alien autopsy show, I erred on the side of caution. I had Jonathan Frank say, until we know more, you must decide, because we knew we were in a very murky area.
That's a bigger tightrope than I'm used to, because it's so explosive. If it is true, it's explosive. If it's fake, it's a hell of a fake,
I have a better question for people. Why would you make a documentary about that case? What was it about that case that so, implored you to do that? Why would you go and spend hours and time and energy on that case When you see the 3 cases that we're going to make into feature documentaries in the next year or 2, these are juicy with video, NASA, top experts, footage, mass sightings. Wait till you see this. I'm not going to spoil it tonight, but if you want me to come on and talk about the movie,
absolutely. You're welcome here anytime, Bob. You can be my new co-host.
Well, that's the funny. I would love to be with you. It's almost like what's the word? It's a mitzvah, as we say in the Jewish religion. I would love to be with you. So here's the thing. My view of the things is that we are all evolving in many ways. No distributor should be held accountable for anything that came out so far. If it made money and it did well, that's fine. That's their job to distribute, get things out to people. But buyer beware.
Sure. Yeah.
The old expression, caveat emptor. I had a producer years ago. I consider him one of my mentors. He's a top producer at CBS News still. And he coined the phrase when we were doing a show years ago, including one about Ronald Reagan seeing UFOs when he was governor. And Ronald Reagan gave me the thumbs up and the facts and said, yes, I wish you warm good wishes. And it's true. So I showed Mark, this guy's name Mark, I showed him this fax coming in. We were working together years ago.
From Ronald Reagan.
So Ronald Reagan, he couldn't believe it. So Mark is a good friend of mine. And he literally coined the phrase. He'd see me coming. Okay, caveat emptor. Okay, caveat emptor. Buyer beware in Latin. So caveat emptor became kind of my little secret, like a joke with him and me. And it's sort of like, I know that the things I cover are way out there, but buyer beware is what I say the viewer should always be saying. The viewer should always be saying, I got to beware. This may not be true. So you have to do a really good job for them. You've got to do everything you can. And if somebody wants to point fingers at me and say, well, you shouldn't do alien autopsy until you know for sure. Come on. Every newspaper, magazine before and now shows, they tell things that happen right away. And then they try to figure it out. We did a much more responsible job at Fox than many newspapers do, and I'm proud to this day that Time Magazine wrote about my work. Chicago Tribune wrote about my work. If they wanted to take a shot at me, believe me, I would have taken it. And they didn't. They recognized that I was in a murky world, trying my best to cover crazy stuff. One of the things I'm most proud of is the Time Magazine article about alien autopsy. They said something to the effect of, a home video stirs the liveliest debate of any home movie since the Zapruder film. They compared it to the assassination footage because people were analyzing the footage and going through those moments, poring over the footage. And that's what we cared about. We cared about saying, look, this is incredible footage. Whoever made it should be like given a major thumbs up. So if it's fake, why was it fake? Is it actually based on something real? To this day, I still do believe it was based on something that could well be in the government archives.
Yeah,
and there are reasons I believe that. And I'll be glad to tell you.
And I agree with you too. And certainly I would not be here if I didn't have a belief that we're not being told the whole truth and there's hidden mysteries and things like that. I just have a problem with the people that are willing to live in a delusional fantasy world and live and just believe people and not, expect evidence or proof. And it seems like the scale went way out of whack for a while.
Yep.
It used to be much better. I remember it being much better in my younger years. And then I'm telling you, this Corey Goode and David Wilcock came along and everything became, you just got to have a great story. And now there are hundreds of copycats to that now. Secret space program insiders going to Mars, fighting aliens and all kinds of stuff with no
all people, Steve, all people seem to care about in the last, I'll call it decade or so, is a good story. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. When Bob Lazar came out in 1989, right? Everybody poured over the evidence, poured over what he was presenting. Everyone gave it a shot, and very few people could put any credibility to it, including people that have really vested interest in proving it could be true. I never touch it with a 10-foot pole. I interviewed George Knapp in 1997 for UFOs Caught on Tape #1. There's young George, young Bob too. Young George, bright, bush, there he was. Never mentioned when we talked about Area 51, he never talked about Bob Lazar. Everybody knew how spurious, how not credible Bob Lazar's story was. Years later, another guy comes along, wants to reinvent the George Knapp Library, gets the thing going, and good for the distributor, good for people who made money, whatever. It doesn't make that case any more credible.
And that particular documentary, Bob, I have a big problem with because I was in contact with the film producer. I gave him all kinds of evidence. He did the lie by omission, which is, I'm going to tell this story as if it's true. And any evidence that exists that might prove it's not true, we are just going to leave out. We are going to, and that's done on purpose to sell the story.
Well, we have to ask the public now. You see, producers like me coming from a credible background, I'm proud to say, and have gone through the rigors of journalistic ethics and journalistic fact checking and having networks over me to keep me in line, so to speak.
Yeah.
I know what needs to be done. But the bad news is, Steve, now the investors, the public, they're the ones choosing what things get made and what things don't get made. It's like the old days in the film industry. If you don't get the money to make it, it doesn't get made. So the money, and in the past, a lot of money would come from the banks and from networks and from those kind of big, companies. Now, with the marketing methods we're describing, I have to go out and talk to individuals and people who invest in product like this and tell them the difference and make sure they understand that if you invest in something crowdfunding, I mean, the idea that someone runs around telling people that there's going to be an alien invasion, but it's going to come from UFOs, reverse engineering by our government, and go out and get money from people and crowdfund it.
$500,000, Bob.
You don't even give them
$500,000.
The model that we're looking at trying to change finally is that investors get involved with producers that have credentials like me. They get a percentage of ownership. They get paid back not only their investment very quickly in the process when money starts coming in from the movie or documentary, but they also get an interest payment as well. And then they get to participate in the profits for years to come. What is going on with a guy like Stephen Greer? Who knows? Are these people getting a hat? An ashtray? What are they getting? Are they getting?
They're getting a really badly made documentary that didn't cost $500,000 to produce.
And then we get into the issue of that if you do get investment capital from people and you put up a documentary that looks like a fraction of that's actually on the screen, what is the reason for that? Did you?
Yeah, this is an issue. And see, you're a talented and well-known television producer, and I have many different times said that some of these people are crowdfunding $500,000. And then you look at the documentary, and maybe it's because I do video editing and I've always worked on the cheap, but I know I'm looking at this and I'm going, there's $10,000 or $20,000 here. If we want to be real generous, 100 if he paid Hollywood level people to do the sound and to run the cameras and union people, maybe $100,000. Steve, what happened to the other $400,000? It's a grift. This is a grift.
Right. The UFO field has been invaded by grifters. It happened with Stephen Greer early. He can call me anytime and discuss it. No problem. Okay.
Oh no, and Bob's throwing down on Stephen Greer.
Politics will get into this. The new documentary feature I'm working on will get into all these issues. We'll get into the issues of money, where it comes from, what ends up on screen, and what kind of investigative prowess do we have? What kind of actual journalistic acumen is involved? Who is Stephen Greer? Let me tell you about Stephen. I think I told you before. He showed up at my office at Unsolved Mysteries years ago, in 1993, I believe. He came in on somebody else's meeting. He literally piggybacked on somebody's meeting. I expected one individual. I see two. Who are you? What are you doing here? I'm Stephen Greer. And you are exactly who? Why are you here? And I don't just invite people up to the Unsolved Mysteries office. Really. So he's sitting there. And by the way, there's two other producers in my office that were sitting there watching this happen. So Greer goes to me, I'm going to become the guy in UFOs. I'm going to be leading this revelations about UFOs. I said, didn't you just say you're an EMT worker? You work as an emergency guy? He said, my goal is to be a UFO researcher and tell the world the truth about this stuff, and I'm going to make a big, big mark in this thing. Wonderful. But in the meantime, get out of my office. You were not invited into this office, and please leave. And in the meantime, I stopped him from taking, he had a tape of a case that we're going to tell a movie about. It was one of the biggest cases, Unsolved Mysteries, has ever aired on any subject at all. It's called the Guardian UFO or Canadian UFO
I'm very
landing.
familiar with that.
This is one of them. What'd you say, Steve?
I'm very familiar with that one.
This is a very interesting case, and the Canadians have completely blown it. They have no idea what's on their own territory. Some of the researchers there are kind of comical, to be quite honest with you. Bob Nathan at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory reviewed the tape in a non-official capacity for Unsolved Mysteries and me, and I also did it in my own special. He said he could not identify the lighting. In other words, the actual lighting signatures coming off of this craft. He couldn't even imagine how they were created by our own technology. The lighting signature, the way the luminosity of this craft was acting was not like anything he'd ever seen before, and he was an optical expert. This is the guy who invented image processing. One of the other experts is very friendly with the guy from the CIA I know, and he looked at this as well, and he was an optical physicist, and he said there's no way it can be explained other than a dish-shaped craft blinking, pulsating over this lady's field. It appears to be a little bit above the ground, but we didn't see it coming and going. Now, the question is, what else does this case kind of bring up? Government, intergovernment. It brings up so many things, not just, now, if it's not an alien ship, it's probably some kind of governmental test. It involves secret helicopters flying around. It involved a 3-year period. It's an amazing story. So the reason I bring it up is, not only are we going to make a movie about it, but it's going to try to show people the way you analyze a case, the way you dig into one. And that's important. And then we're going to do 2 other big cases we're going to talk about, maybe some other
That's
night.
interesting, though, about Stephen Greer. So he is sort of premeditated becoming.
But let's not the point. Yeah. He had a copy of the Guardian tape. We had an exclusive arrangement with the 1 or 2 researchers that really were prominently involved in the revealing of this material. And we could not figure out who got a copy. But regardless, I said to Greer, look, that is an exclusive tape we've already secured the rights to. There's going to be an exclusive broadcast coming up. By the way, when the show came on, I believe it was the highest rated Unsolved Mysteries opening ever in there. So if you liked our show, you liked my work, I'm proud to say that was the highest rated UFO.
I remember that show specifically, and I taped it on a VCR. While it was brought, that's how long ago it was. Like, you had to tape things on a VCR. I taped it. Yeah.
And to give Greer a little bit of credit, I do want to say he never did ever show that tape anywhere publicly before we aired our broadcast. I think he honored my threat.
Well, you guys would have sued the balls off of him.
We would have been, I got to tell you, there are guys that Unsolved Mysteries. There's one lawyer named Michael. There would have been people all over him like no one's business. Now, the only reason, again, but I bring it up because Stephen has the ability, I believe, to stop the BS. Stop telling people about Carol Rosalind. The fact that she knew Werner Van Braun and Van Braun said something. He was a freaking Nazi, okay? Let's be clear about this, okay? Would he lie about something? When I say he was a Nazi, meaning he previously was in the Nazi party, okay? So this guy may have helped build rockets for our government. So did Jack Parsons. I mean, there are people in our government who built rockets that were kind of nuts. So if you help build our rocket program, that doesn't give you the ability just to make up shit. So if Werner Van Braun told her, the assistant to, the old story.
Yeah, and this is a secondhand hearsay account with no corroboration. There's no corroboration that he ever said that.
How could that become your platform? Literally your platform when you moved away from other platforms you were doing. So people bought in on these subjects from people that self-made documentaries with no overseeing body above them. And you end up with what you end up with, which is this kind of like myriad mixture of baloney and half-truth and partial this and partial that in a field that is direly needing some serious investigation. Because I do believe we have evidence of visitation of unknown entities here on this planet. I do believe that.
So you're still a believer after all of the fake stuff that you have seen through all of the productions and all the hoaxes. You're still a believer, right?
Stephen, I could show you one video that was in UFOs Caught on Tape 2. And it shows a UFO doing a right angle turn in space, like a boom, boom, that we can't do today. To this day, we can't do it.
I'm sure
So
that I have that somewhere. I'll dig it out. Yeah.
Things like it was taken by one of the shuttles. It's clearly something that needs to be explained. We don't have any technology that can do that right angle turn in a nanosecond and going fast speeds. So we don't have that. And when these videos were released by TTSA and the New York Times, you would have thought they would have movement that shows possible extraterrestrial technology. The same individual at NASA, Bob Nathan, he's like my grandfather of UFO teaching, you know. He said to me years ago, Bob Kiviat, when you see movement in a UFO footage, video, whatever, that cannot be explained conventionally, then you know you've got something. You've got to look at the movement and the actual technology being exhibited. If you don't see anything and it appears to be prosaic, it could be very much explainable, it probably is. So that's it. So when these guys like Elizondo and other people are running around going, oh, we're going to see many more videos.
They overpromise and they underdeliver. We never see that, oh, there's a 27-minute version of this video. Where's it at? It's been years. Nobody's got it.
Even the New York Times.
I think it's a bluff. I think it's a bluff saying that there's a clear video of this in HD that's 27 minutes.
He is a complete fraud. This is a man who is a complete fraud. He never worked for ATIP because ATIP never existed, according to Harry Reid and Lukaski, the people who ushered in all this BS, okay? There was no ATIP. It did not exist. It was a made-up name. The OSWAP group was actually put together to analyze technology that we know existed, like the Chinese, the Russians. What are we going to have in the future? And then they lied to Congress, literally lied to Congress, and said it was something like that, when in reality it was money going straight to Bob Bigelow at Skinwalker Ranch. How could we not, as Americans, want to get to the bottom of that bullshit?
How can we not want our money back? Because what do we get? Stories about werewolves and a bunch of nonsense?
Bob Bigelow should step forward. Bigelow should step forward tonight, and say, whatever Harry Reid said posthumously in that foreword to Lukaski's book about Skinwalker Ranch, George Knapp was a co-writer. I understand that George recently came out. I've not seen this, by the way. I heard he recently came out and said, hey, I don't know if that was true or not, to that effect. I'm not going to look at the lighting anymore. My lights here where I live, it has a timer, so I can't shut the timer off.
I'm sorry about that.
But I'm doing one more, Steve. One more.
Okay, all right. Well, we are. If you're just joining us live, we are here with legendary television writer and producer Bob Kiviat of of Alien Autopsy fame, UFOs Best Evidence Caught on Tape 1 and 2, and many, many more. And we didn't really listen. I want to tell you the truth. I'm very anxious to see all these new projects that you're working on, given that I grew up with so many of incredible things that you
Can I ask a self-serving question to you?
Yeah, sure.
Your particular audience is the audience I relish. It's the kind of audience that wants the truth, whatever that truth is. Yes, I believe UFOs probably represent visitation from another either dimension, planet, or whatever. And that's why I stay focused. But that doesn't mean every UFO. That means there have been some UFO incidents that have occurred that our government is aware of and probably involve otherworldly technology and visitors. However, the amount of those probably are so far
minuscule. Yeah.
So minuscule that if you wanted to cover it up as an overall subject for the next 100 years, you probably could. So people who think the government couldn't cover that up, they're wrong. Number two,
look at the Manhattan Project.
Number
they
two,
can cover anything up.
Bill Clinton, you love him or not love him, after he was president, said he believed there was a government above the government. He said it. Now, what reasons does he believe that? That's for another day. So the government above the government, whatever that may be, like Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, the military-industrial complex speech, these are warnings to us as a culture that there might be something that we are not being told about our world and where we are in the universe. So if that's the case, I ask your viewers, your listeners, recognize the change in documentary making, that the public has the ability now to self-invest in what they want to see. These movies that I'm going to make, they need to be supported by the populace because the money has to come from investors now. The distributors are putting up a percentage of these movies, but overall, I need to go out to the investment community now, like I used to go to Fox and NBC and USA Network and others to ask for that money. I have to go now and ask others in the world who are interested. It doesn't have to be $100,000. I mean, but again, the difference is we'll have an actual production schedule, just like we are with the networks. We'll be honorable to the investors in every way, just like we would to the network. We are going to get it completed in a relatively short amount of time. So there's no confusion about where the money's going. It's all going on the screen, which means we as producers are using that money to create what you see on the screen, and we can document that. It's called a business. It has to be done that way. Recently, from another individual, someone told me they took 8 years to make a documentary. 8 years.
Oh, you mean James Fox? James Fox took
no names.
years.
I'm not going to mention any names. And the number, the number.
So somebody took 8 years to make a documentary.
If you took 8 years,
okay, all right.
If you took 8 years to make a documentary, were you raising money for 8 years, and that money was then used at the very last minute to make the documentary, or were there people working with you during those 8 years to raise that money? And the number that I heard that was raised is so shocking to what you see that was created. You blush as a producer. You go, what happened there? So I'm not going to say because I don't know what happened there. I know one thing. When you
this seems to be a problem is there's this. So in other words, just for the sake of anybody who didn't catch the grift, I call it a grift. These people will generate huge amounts of money. In Stephen Greer's case, we can prove on paper, because they were public GoFundMes and things, that he would raise $500,000 to make a documentary and then go take that documentary to anybody familiar with television, video, documentary production, and they'll tell you that's not $500,000 on that screen. That's a tiny portion of it. So these people are getting rich. Yeah, these people are getting rich, and they're not being honest with the public about what the production actually costs. You know, I joked, like, I want Stephen Greer to give me a spreadsheet of what he spent the $500,000 on, because
you should have to show that.
No way.
Absolutely.
No way.
Yeah. I don't know if legally this new method of creating programming has been tested in any way, but I wonder how a person who invested in something, especially crowdfunding, sees something that was created and justifies their investment, other than they feel anything about UFOs is good, like Leslie Keane says. Anything is out, as long as UFOs are being talked about in the public.
Pushing the ball down the field. I hear that one all the time. He's still pushing the ball down the field for disclosure. Yeah, right. He's pushing a lot of money into his bank account. That's what he's doing, you know?
We are competing. So let's be clear. I am competing now as a producer. The same way that if a producer at 11 a.m. goes to meet with Fox and they want to make a movie or documentary about, you know, a special or whatever about UFOs or aliens or mysteries of ghosts or prophecies or anything I've ever touched, you know, in my work, they're competing against me. So the network has to decide who they're going to choose. Bob Kiviat, journalistic credentials, major magazine articles in Omni Magazine,
proven track record of successful productions. Yeah.
Or, right, exactly. Or somebody coming in from the cooking show who wants to make a documentary about UFOs. Who are you going to choose? So the same way that I'm competing there years ago, I'm competing now with these people who've got their kind of like in already with these distribution methods. And I have to now compete for those who invest in these type of things. Would you rather work with me, or would you rather work with these type of people? There's no other way around it. I have to raise money to make these movies happen. But the difference between me, I think, and a lot of other people is I have a track record of doing things by the book, and we will do them by the book. And if someone says to me, Bob, you went a couple of thousand over budget, that's nothing compared to what we're talking about here. We're talking about the opposite. We're talking about people seemingly taking advantage of a system that is really in its infancy. And we're trying to figure out, in other words, documentary makers having no controlling, overseeing group above them, bringing in documentary content that hasn't been vetted by anybody else and goes right out to the public. There has to be some sort of a stopgap, I believe. And so the stopgap needs to be credible, professional people providing that documentary content to the public. And if the people that are distributing these things, distributing them, see the difference and still are able to get the same value, if not more production and value of actual profit, I think they'll come around and realize that this is not for everybody. You can't just give everybody an opportunity to get out there and talk about things that are very, very, controversial and maybe very important for our culture. What's more important than whether we're being visited or not? Pretty important, right? So.
Yeah, I would think so. But it seems to get lost by the wayside in our modern world. There's just so much going on. Well, I agree with you. And one thing I wanted to ask you, I don't know why, but there's been a whole bunch of requests in the live chat. People want to know what you think about Linda Moulton Howe.
Linda Moulton Howe had one amazing moment.
He shook his head, guys. He went,
She had one amazing moment.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, she had one. She got involved in the cattle mutilation story. She helped bring the cattle mutilations mystery to the public. Nobody can say otherwise. She did that with I believe it's called Alien Harvest or something like that. And then
a strange harvest.
Right. And then she went off the rails. She went off the rails. She decided that everything is good for her in the later part of her life anyway. She decided that she's just going to become a mouthpiece for every wild story out there. And you kind of took her to task, and a few other people have, for a fake photo clearly made by some artist. And I felt bad for her. When I saw that video, I felt bad for her because things catch up to you eventually. They catch up. And if you keep putting out baloney, you better get some bread because you're going to be cutting that sandwich up pretty soon.
So that's the best analogy ever. I'm stealing that.
You can.
If you're going to put out bologna, you better have some
bread. Get some bread and some mustard, and you'll be eating it soon because people are going to dice and slice you, and they will. And I think that's the one thing. If you take on controversial subjects like a fake story in a South American country, you have to then take the barbs that come at you. You can't just walk away from that. You have to say, okay, Tony Baragula's research in 2012 should have been mentioned in your movie. If it wasn't,
you want to be fair and impartial,
Right. There's a guy, by the way, I'm going to give a little shout out to a guy named AJ on the YouTube. And you can research him. You can find out who he is. He tells a story in YouTube, all the the woo factor, all the sensational storyline that someone knows about a story. And then at the end, he goes, but. And then he tries his best to tell you what is factually true. Nothing really wrong with that. 17 minutes or so, you're hearing the
woo,
the wild woo, no supporting evidence, just the story, or some may, but and then he says, but, and then he comes in with what appears to be, I wouldn't go as far as to say debunking his own story like we did with World's Greatest Hoaxes on Alien Autopsy, where we actually deconstructed it for the viewer. But he does a degree of that, and you have to give him credit. So I reached out to him recently, and I said that to him. So he may be someone we'll see featured in this documentary.
And again, that's cool. And again, I was gonna say too, like I miss the days where things were done. I don't want to call it your way, but you were so influential that I think a lot of people copied your formula, which would be to present the mystery and all the reasons it might be true. But like you were saying, this person does, then bring in the skeptical side and present all the stuff. This is all we could prove is factual. It just seems now that people, they lie to the audience and they massage the data, and then they say things like, well, you have to use your discernment. Well, that's great, but you're only giving people half of the story. You're purposefully leaving out things that you you think will help sell the story.
Steve, did you remember what I said about alien autopsy, the progenitor of some of what you're saying? We said, until we know more, you'll have to decide for yourself. Meaning,
that's very fair.
We're going to stay on it. We're going to continue digging. We're going to get to the answer. And then when we finally have enough to show you again, we'll come back and we'll further this truth vetting best we can. It meant something to me when I kept saying in the story, until we know more, you'll have to decide for yourself. We didn't just say, you'll have to decide for yourself. We said, we're going to more or less, I hope it came out that way. It should have. We'll stay on it and we'll be on it, even though we're not even a series. We're a series of specials, And so I never got my chance to do a series the way I would do, just like I described. We would follow that same idea. We'll show you what people claim, and then we're going to show you the truth of the damn thing, And that's a job. It's hard work. Steve, this is not like, everybody's, job. This is not the kind of thing everyone's going to do. You have to have journalistic skill, talent, interest. You have to have a tenacity. You have to kind of like say, okay, I don't care what happens as long as we get to the truth. But if you're saying, I don't want to tell the truth because that could blow my money from me.
And that's a lot of what this is.
It's impossible. If we as Americans lived our lives that way for the last 200 and some odd years, where would we be? If it was only about money and forget about truth, what? It's nuts. I think our last administration and the person that was in power, regardless of what you like or not like about this guy, Trump, I grew up in New York. I watched Donald Trump for years as a kid, read 3 newspapers a day that would trash this guy. People don't know.
Was it funny for you to see him win the presidency?
Beyond shocking. There are people from New York that I'm sure were really beyond shocked. Yeah. And by the way, our own culture, some percentage I heard recently of 35% of the country would still vote for this guy. That's the scariest thought I ever heard of my life. You don't have to believe in the impeachments. You don't have to believe that he was responsible for the January 6th debacle on Capitol Hill. Just look at him. You're going to give that guy the keys to our nuclear weapons again? You're going to let him be right next to the football again? After almost having our vice president murdered by a bunch of crazy people following QAnon? It's not. I tried to get the CBS News organization and another organization to do a story about QAnon in 2018 and 19, warning them that my journalistic experience has taught me to not underestimate the kind of crazy theories these people were putting out there, like adrenochrome. Do you know where adrenochrome comes from? The idea that...
I don't know where it originated from. Where did it originate from?
There's a lot of history about the New World Order, about the Illuminati, about all this other type of stuff like Stanley Kubrick wrote about and did a movie about, Eyes Wide Shut. There's a whole history of that this group called QAnon embraced and usurped and took in from other conspiracy theories. And I was warning CBS News, that was the problem. They were kind of co-opting other conspiracy theories that millions of people are interested in. So when they heard these lines of like adrenochrome, the idea that you could, how sick is it? The idea that you could scare or hurt a child and get their adrenal gland, whatever,
energy
material,
or something,
or energy, or if you want to go metaphysical, like energy out of those children. And that is the kind of things, nuts. And these are things, I guess, in the paranormal area or the conspiracy world that doesn't make everybody, freak out as much. But in the regular world, when the regular people, the voters of this country, accepted the person who was kind of like, kind of encouraging that crap and vote for that guy, then why would I be shocked when you're having documentaries made that are a bunch of baloney, even though they're making maybe millions of dollars? The money should not justify the value of what that is. However, I'm stuck now having to say to the people listening and watching, if you want credible documentary program, if you want the best possible programming, work with people like me, and we will bring these things to the distributors and they will be glad to put them out. and we will then start a whole new kind of renaissance of documentary making. So unfortunately, Steve, I have to become kind of the poster child for credible journalism and documentary supported by the public investing. That's where we are now.
Yeah. Well, I for one can't wait to see the new projects. And I was going to ask you, do you have a timeline for when some of this stuff is going to start coming out?
I'll be as honest as anyone should be. When we receive the investment capital for each of the movies to a level we could start principal photography, that's 1/4 of the budget. Fox would then write a check when you're ready for, Bob, when you're done with your principal photography, meaning shooting interviews, we'll give you the next part of the money we're going to put up. So we're going to do this by the book, just like every other network I work with, whatever. When we have enough money to start principal photography, we'll begin that. When we have enough money to start editing, we'll begin that. When we have enough money to finish the post-production process, we'll do that. So I do not feel comfortable starting without knowing we have the full amount at the end.
Oh, I understand. And do you have a website or someplace that people can find out more about it? And please share your Twitter as well. So
we'll have all that available for you to help give your viewers and your people probably in the next 2 days.
Oh, okay. I'll add it to the description of the video. It'll be here in a few days then.
We
just getting it together. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you the situation. I want everyone to know. A press release is going out in a couple of days. We have just closed the deal, as we say officially, with fully executed agreements. And now I can finally talk about this properly. So we are working with a great company called Screen Media. They are going to be distributing these multiple movies. I'm not going to get into which one's coming out first, because again, it'll be predicated on the investment capital that we raise. We have a budget. We know what the number is. We need to reach that number to bring the quality of programming or movie making up to at least what I did my last one with sci-fi in 2014, 15, 16. That was Aliens on the Moon, The Truth Exposed. Anyone could watch that, available on a few different platforms, but you can surely see it on something called shoutfactoryrightnow.com. And you can also see it by just putting Aliens on the Moon, The Truth Exposed on YouTube, and you can watch it on one of the channels there. But this is a show that's been on Netflix for 3 years, that was on world networks around the global community, and people should really see a quality programming or a quality program. Every single dollar I received literally is on that screen. And for whatever reasons, I took a hit on it. So all I can say is I'm proud to say I know the ethics involved. If you don't put on the screen what you were given to create, that's grift. And that should not be allowed.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with you. I'm looking forward to seeing your new productions. I'm hoping that you'll force a change in this thing. Like we said earlier, the ship has to right itself or it's just going to sink.
Steve, I can't survive as an accredited journalist doing documentary programming for this culture unless people understand what we're talking about tonight. The investment capital that people bring to these projects also let them become partners for years in these projects. Imagine you have a chance now to actually be a profit participant in these things, and honorably, not some slippy, kind of like
fly by night
operation, actual real method. And by the way, I don't know any other producer that has come out and talked about this. So I'm doing it. I want people to understand we should not seed this type of content.
Yeah, it is very brave of you. This is normally inside baseball talk.
You better believe it,
friends.
But UFO interested people, are inside baseball. Baseball is exactly what it is because, and I love baseball, so it's a great analogy. And so do my two young boys. We love the analogy that we're looking at. UFOs have an insular kind of group, people that are interested in the stuff. Just like baseball. When you know the inside track, when you know what's going on, you can make a difference. So people that are aware of what I'm saying, the Greers, the people that go, I want to weaponize my curiosity. You know what I mean? When you
Very diplomatic of you.
Look, I'm trying. There are reasons one day, Steve, and I hope down the road I can really let my hair down and really tell you why I'm being diplomatic. One side of me wants to be scathing, okay? But not against the people that put this out, the people that create it, the people that act like they're documentary makers, that talk about their abilities, and then they do what I would call bunk, okay? Ridiculous, I guess, they're self-producing for their own needs and their own wishes. I see financially as the goal. And unfortunately, that's taking advantage of people that believe in something very ardently and very, very humanistically, and they shouldn't be taken advantage of. So that's how I feel about
I
it.
agree with you 100%.
Yeah. So,
well, I hope you're going to come back here when you have your first film out and debuting, and we'll give it a review.
Well, can I just say one last thing for today?
Sure, absolutely.
The Ufolotics documentary that I plan to put out in 2023 will rip the cover off the ball. Use another baseball analogy. Will rip the cover off the ball of all this stuff. Where the Elizondos came from, where Hal Puthoff came from, where people like Harry Reid came from initially, how they were able to get Bob Bigelow what he was given, and how that was usurp all these characters. But even more than that, we'll start getting into the real interesting cases of UFOs that are away from all this nonsense. And that's what I'd like people to try to think about getting involved with me. So the easiest way to get in touch with me is my email. It's like my name, R for Robert. So it's RKIVIAT at AOL.com. Again, RKIVIAT at AOL.com. I'm back. I'm an old timer on AOL. I love it there. And
are you still on AOL, Bob? Come on.
Well, there's a reason.
We got to get you on Gmail.
Steve, I'm on Gmail too. So Robert Kiviat.
I'm just busting your balls. Yeah.
No problem. If you like Gmail better, Robert Kiviat, no punctuation. Robert, Kiviat at gmail.com. The reason I keep AOL, Steve, I have 10,000 emails.
I still have an account. Yeah, I still have an account.
I am never giving up my archive. This is an archive to die for. If I ever lost this archive of emails and correspondences, and I wouldn't know what to do with. So I'm staying as a prisoner to AOL because I like it. But I want to say one thing about you, though. I want to say something about you.
Oh, well, okay.
The fact that Manny, who I'm working very closely with, and the kind of work he does, and the kind of work you're doing here, warms my heart. I mean it. And it means to me, it keeps me going. So you talk about me having influence on you, you're having influence on me. And you're keeping me in the fight. Because I'll tell you right now, there are many other easier ways to make money. There are many other easier ways to put your kids through college and do what I need to do as a responsible adult, you know? But when it comes to this mystery and other mysteries like it, people deserve the passion and the integrity that I'm trying to give. So if you have any interest in what we had today, the changing of documentary making and how the financial factors have changed, and you can be a part of it, even for small amounts of money, contact me. Don't give it to the people that are making bunk.
Garbage. Yeah. Okay, Bob. Well, I'm going to throw you out of here, and you can just close down your tab when I exit you. You are always welcome here. Thank you.
My pleasure, Steve. We'll keep you posted. And please,
my pleasure as well.
Anyone out there, contact me. We'll talk. Take care.
Bye. All right. Thanks, Bob. Okay. Wow. Well, what a great night for me. Every time I get to talk to Bob, he helps me to sort of relive childhood memories. My father and I always watched Unsolved Mysteries together. And I remember that specific episode with the Guardian UFO case. My father thought it was BS, and I believed that it was, aliens. And and so many amazing projects that he's been working on. I'm so anxious to see these new projects. I'm getting to hear a little bit of behind the scenes stuff about what's going on with that from Manny and him. I think that Ufolotics project especially is going to be eye-opening. There's going to be some big bombs dropping in that thing, and I, for one, can't wait to be there when they do. Just a few things we want to address. For those that are just joining us, you're watching Truth Seekers, and tonight we've interviewed legendary film producer and writer Bob Kiviat of Alien Autopsy fame and UFO's Best Evidence on Tape 1 and 2, and many other things, Unsolved Mysteries. I know some people may be joining us wondering about the Goodgate story. That's right. We hashtag Goodgate, but it's good with an E. GOODEGATE. That is the hashtag where you can follow that hashtag on Twitter for all the latest happenings of this huge breaking story, Goodgate. We originally broadcast the an hour or so of the Corey Goode deposition in his lawsuits. And now we're sort of out of sequence because since then we have been given access to the entire 6 hours of the Corey Goode deposition. We have broadcast 1 hour or more, which would be considered session 1 or part 1. We'll have to figure out a way to fix this, but the sequence is going to be off because what we called part 1 of his deposition was really part 3. We are releasing them without commentary. I think that this is very, very important, and it's in the public's best interest to hear these things that he's saying in this deposition, especially because the Mr. Disclosure Advocate tried to get the deposition marked private or confidential and unable to be shared or broadcast as public record of a court case. I think that's wrong. We're sharing it. I did receive some, I don't even want to get into it. Read the description of the video for the deposition part 1. And there you will find that which we broadcast just before broadcast of this interview today. So you can go there and read the description. If you go to our Truth Seekers homepage on YouTube, just scroll down to videos, and it will be the last video we produced, Corey Goode deposition session 1. And in the description of that video is an explanation of our stance. We will not be threatened, intimidated, silenced, or we will not comply with requests for takedowns where not appropriate. Now, this gets into some dicey areas. If we're ordered by the judge presiding over the case to remove these videos, we will do so. But until such time, I will not be complying with any legal threats, and I will refuse to comply with any demands or attempts to force us to reveal our sources, to take down broadcasts, or reveal to them any other information. I will also refuse to comply with any subpoena that they file regarding this matter, and I am entitled to do so legally under the Pennsylvania Shield Law and the First Amendment Reporter's Privilege laws. For those unaware, I live in the state of Pennsylvania. That's where my studio is. That's where my business is. That's where I live. And there's something called the Pennsylvania Shield Law and First Amendment Reporter's Privilege law. And it provides broad protections to reporters in Pennsylvania who are subpoenaed for their notes, documents, or testimony. And that law is an absolute privilege that precludes the compelled disclosure of confidential source information. I believe that people are trying to get me to reveal the source. Who gave us the deposition tapes or files in this circumstance? They are, telling me they're making all kinds of demands. We will not comply. I will not comply. Truth seekers will not comply. And the fact that a disclosure advocate is going to these lengths to prevent people from hearing his own testimony should tell you everything you need to know about that so-called disclosure advocate. And there's a lot more that I would say, but I think it's enough to say that we are broadcasting all 6 hours of that deposition. And we will probably likely do a show with commentary and talk about it. I will be inviting a panel member of people familiar with Corey Goode's story here. I'm going to ask for Eric, the Awakening Man, who has followed that story since the beginning. We will have Kari Spooky here from our show, who has, of course, followed Corey Goode's story since the very beginning, 2016. Both of these people followed this story. and a few others who have followed his story. And we're going to talk about the revelations in the depositions. And for those unaware, I believe, it's my belief, and I will freely admit that this is speculation. Corey Goode believed that he could say all of those things in that deposition, and then his lawyer would get these depositions termed confidential so that people were unable to share them, see them, hear them, broadcast them. And due to a mistake on the part of his lawyer, who apparently did not file the proper paperwork, that was not the case. They are not confidential. To the best of my knowledge and ability, they are not confidential. And we're able to broadcast them. But my point is that Corey Goode, he thought that he would be able to say all those things and make all those stunning admissions. Like when asked if he's ever been to space, he said, and again, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something to the effect of, been to space physically? I don't think so. Astrally, right? This whole thing seemed to me, and I'm no lawyer, this is just my opinion and my speculation, I freely admit that. It appears to me that Corey Goode thought that he could get away with saying all these things and making all these stunning admissions, like the Anshar aren't real, they're his spirit guides from his meditation. I believe that he thought that he could say all these things in a deposition and no one, including the public here, and members of the UFO community, disclosure community, consciousness community, spiritual community, whatever you want to call this wacky world, I call it conspiracy land, but I believe Corey Goode thought that he could say all those things and then have his lawyer do some legal, maneuvers and get those depositions privated so that no one would ever hear or see what he said there. And due to, again, what I can only call a stunning mistake on the part of his lawyer, apparently, she didn't file the proper paperwork as she was required to do so to get them put into that status. We all get to hear the stunning admissions of a man who has run around telling everybody he's a secret space program insider for the past 7 or so years and selling those stories, monetizing his so-called life story for profit, telling everybody it was a true story. He admits under oath, have you ever been to space? Well, no, not physically. And again, I'm paraphrasing, but and one might ask themselves, then doesn't that bring into light all kinds of questions? Like, what about the people that advertised him as having these space battles and space experiences and took money from people? Is there going to be any culpability for people who helped him sell what we now know was works, or what I believe we now know was works of fiction as true stories? What about all the people that helped him sell that for years, including Jimmy Church, Gaia, David Wilcock, many others, all the conference organizers that paid him to speak and profited from his apparently fake stories or allegedly fake stories? This is a whole can of worms. And I got to tell you, we're going to open it. We're not going anywhere. We're going to open it. So I have an incredible amount of work to do tonight. We're trying to get the part 2 of the broadcast of the deposition up tonight. And we're doing our very best. I want to thank Spooky, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure if the other party helping us in this endeavor wishes to be identified. So I will check with them before thanking them, but let this serve as a thank you to that person. I don't want to remember this guy's running around suing everybody, so people are understandably, may want their identity protected if they are helping in our efforts here for real transparency. Hey, Mr. Disclosure Advocate, all we're doing is broadcasting you answering questions, and I think that the public deserves to know. So let the chips fall where they may. I will not comply. That's what I'm going to say. If there's going to be any more these things, the Pennsylvania law is very clear. I'm protected. I don't have to reveal my sources even under threat of subpoena. And I feel very strongly that I won't. So they can go on a fishing expedition if they want to. And we're going to get to work on that, friends. And I apologize. We will do, let me just very quickly, we're not even going to play you a single commercial. Well, we don't really have commercials. We have one bumper that we play to let people know how to support us. It's enough to say that you can support us through the money button down there. There's a money button, the super chat, or through PayPal. You can become a Patreon supporter, or you can also become a channel member. We want to thank Comply Zaert for a kind and generous €777 who says, invest in a fistful of shrooms for alien disclosure. Well, thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support. We truly appreciate it. And I will check in quickly with the PayPal. I also want to thank Sweet Caroline for a kind and generous $20 Cash App pledge. But I have to remind everybody, I wasn't able to get your $20, Sweet Caroline, because you sent it to truthseekershow@gmail.com at Cash App or something like that. Or maybe I have some kind of an issue. You have to send it to just Truthseekershow at Cash App. Then we get it. But, you know, these things happen. Not a big deal. Yeah, so we're all caught up. And what I'm going to say is I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. I am overwhelmed busy trying to get this deposition out because if the legal status of that deposition changes before I'm able to broadcast it all, then it's problematic. We'd like to broadcast the entire 6 hours. So we are all chips in on this one. We're all hands on deck. All of us are working furiously to bring it to you, and we're going to bring it to you later tonight, this evening. It might be later, past midnight, maybe past 1 a.m., but there will be another release of another hour of this stunning deposition. You have to hear some of this stuff to believe it, friends, and we're going to bring it to you. So I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. I want to thank our kind and generous benefactors, PayPal supporters, Patreon, everybody. Thank you so much for your support. And your support allows us to do this great work that we're doing here and bring you the real truth, not try to hide it in legal mumbo jumbo. We're bringing it to you because that's what we do here. So, what else can I say? We're going to be back later on this evening with another hour. Please just watch, like, comment, subscribe. Subscribe to our channel here and hit the notification bell. And as soon as that premiere of the next hour of Corey Goode's deposition is going live, you'll know about it. And you can come here and I will be in the live chat. I'm not going to sleep tonight until we get through this. I feel very strongly that this should all be public. And I will continue to feel that way. And I will continue to work for peeling back the layers of deception for all of you and showing you the truth. That's what we do here. Thank you all for your support. I want to thank, of course, Bob Kiviat for being an incredible guest. Can't wait to have him back already. So that's all we got for you, friends. Until next time, my name is Stephen Cambion. Good night and God bless all.
Truthseekers is a viewer-supported show. Wonderful people like you who enjoy this show send pledges in the form of super chats, super stickers, super thanks, PayPal, or Cash App. Instructions for how to help are in the description. You can also join our Patreon, and for as little as $1 a month you can get extra content. Patreon supporters get a backstage pass, early access to all our production videos before they are distributed publicly, Stephen Campion's music, private writings, a monthly show journal, and more. You can also become a YouTube channel member for $5 a month. A YouTube membership includes all of the Patreon benefits, plus a special members badge, priority reply to video comments, and the live chat, plus a monthly members-only video. We thank you all, kind and generous benefactors, for supporting Truth Seekers. Thank you for your generosity and support.